Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So this is going to be the third video in my series of battle reports for the ETC. This was held in Pizarro this summer. It's already like nearly a month ago, but this was my list. So Empire of Sunstyle, and then on the third day my first matchup was going to be Ogre Khans. I was quite excited for this one because I thought that this was quite a good matchup for me, to be honest. So the Mammoth Hunters, they do multiple wounds against Towering Presence. However, I don't have any Towering Presence in my list. They do fight quite a bit, but then again, they're not really a match for a unit of Knights of the Sun Griffin, I would say. My opponent obviously is going to have a lot of board control with the Yetis that Vanguard, with a lot of the Mammoth Hunters that Vanguard. And with plenty of chaff in the list in the Sabertooth Tigers. And then he does have the Rock Aurochses, obviously, that can charge into my units. And if they get the charge off, that's going to be quite hurtful. In addition, the Slave Giant with the Great Weapon is going to be chewing through quite a lot, even though I will also be able to do the same. Let's go to the first picture. So for this battle, I believe I have like 3 pictures. This is after my opponent's first turn. Yes, it's after his vanguards and moves, so it's the start of my turn 1. This is how I deployed. It was encircle, so I had the flanks and my opponent had the middle. I gave my opponent the middles so that he would have the building in the middle of his deployment zone, and that would not be very useful because it would split up his army in hopefully 2 parts. My opponent deployed, and I saw one thing that was quite nice in my view, which was that his one of his stone horns has a character on it, the other does not, and he grouped everything with the stone horn that had a character on it. I guess he's used to playing this way because it's his general or his BSB, so it does provide his armies some extra discipline. However, for me, it being a character allows me to duel out his model, obviously. But I'll get into that later. So for me, left to right, I have a unit of Knights of the Sun Griffin all the way on the flank. And you can just barely see the corner of the unit. Then I have a unit of heavy infantry. I have my electoral cavalry with characters. I have my arcane engine. Another unit of heavy infantry. Then I have the Knights of the Sun Griffin with the flaming standard. Then I have my state militia, and all the way on the right, out of this picture as well, to be honest, is another unit of Knights of the Sun Griffin. For my opponent after Vanguard, on the left, just barely on the board, is a unit of Yetis that you cannot really see on the picture, but you can see the marker. Positioned in such a way that I could not charge in with my Knights of the Sun Griffin due to some wonky board edge rules that, like, well, the people who know what I'm talking about will probably know what I'm talking about. Then we have the, I believe this was the Iron Fist Giant, the blue one. We have a unit of Yetis. We have a Mammoth Hunter. I believe this was not the BSB. No, this was not the BSB. This was one of the guys. In the back, a lot of Scraplings. In the front, unit of Yetis in front of my Knights. Then there's a bit of a blob, which is the BSB, the Slave Giant with Great Weapon, and his character on Stonehorn. And then in front of my lines by now, there's a Saber Tusk and the unit of Saber Tusks to chaff my Knights with the Sun Griffin and to some extent my heavy infantry. And what else do we have? Well, on the right side we still have a Stonehorn on the hill, and we have a Mammoth Hunter off the field with his Saber Tusk. So this was the situation after turn 1. I must say I respect the aggressive play of my opponent because it was quite an aggressive play. I believe at this point my opponent thought that he had the game in his pocket, and I was not so sure about it because I have seen what these electoral cavalry can go through and what they can withstand. Especially with minimalized discipline, I figured that this would not be that much of an issue even. Because I can duel out a lot of his stuff, his scary stuff, most notably the Stonehorn. And otherwise he's going to do some impact hits, but the rest of his stuff is going to hit on 5-up only. I will remain stat-fast for quite a while, probably. I have my heavy infantry support, counter charges, and I have Knights of the Sun Griffin unit to, in a one-on-one engagement, win out on every battle that my opponent can generate, except for against the Stonehorn when it's charging. So this was the turn 1, and then the next picture. This is probably going to be the most pivotal moment of the game. So this is obviously my knights that are in the left side of the picture here, and this is the big target for my opponent. Him, I guess, arguing that if he would get rid of my knights, the game would basically be his, which is quite a fair assumption. So in the previous picture you saw that he chaffed me with some Yetis. I managed to, well, charge in, and well, he didn't flee, because then he would have opened up my my big block to his entire army, basically. So he had to stay there. I managed to do 5 wounds on the Yetis, and then there was one that still remained with a single wound. He broke from combat. I opted to restrain, and actually this model was in this way able to chaff his own Stonehorn. So that was a good situation for me. So yeah, this was a moment of frustration for my opponent, because if he can go in with the Stonehorn, then he is quite likely to deal quite a lot of damage to my knights. My idea was that basically I don't really have a lot to fear from the Stonehorn as long as my heavy infantry is available. So maybe I should have actually charged with the Knights of the Sun Griffin onto the Saber-Tusk, big Saber-Tusk unit rather than the heavy infantry. Though I figured that with a charge in the flank, with a big flank with 2 ranks and a banner, and maybe some wounds, I would break the Saber-Tusks. However, this situation in the forest, my opponent did 4 wounds with the Saber-Tusks, and I actually didn't manage to break him. So it would have been better for me to either support that unit a bit with some magic maybe, or charge him with the Knights of the Sun Griffin. Because my idea here would be that, well, if my opponent wants to go into my knights, that is fine. I have my counter charge available. My opponent cannot lock my heavy infantry with any of his pieces, because his Saber-Tusk on the bottom, I believe he couldn't charge. I don't remember if he could. I think he's facing the wrong way, but I'm not sure anymore. But anyway, my heavy infantry, as long as they are available for a counter charge, there's not a lot my opponent could do, I figure. Because if my opponent charges in with his Yetis and his other stuff, sure, he can issue a duel. But I will gladly actually refuse that duel, and then it's my turn to issue a duel. And if I counter charge with my heavy infantry onto the Stonehorn, which has the amazing impact that's against knights, I can issue a duel with the champion of my heavy infantry. My opponent's Stonehorn is the only model that is in contact with the heavy infantry, so it's only model eligible to accept the duel. So either he can smash flat my heavy infantry champion, or he can elect to not accept the duel. So I was not that concerned about this situation. My opponent was a bit more vivid in the entire situation. But he, in the end, he charged in with, I believe he tried to charge in with both giants, both mammoth hunters, and 2 units of Yetis, and in the end he got the great weapon giant, he got both mammoth hunters, and he got 1 unit of Yetis in there. So one of the giants failed, and yeah, basically we were kind of locked in combat for quite a while. I'm gonna show you the next picture, and then you can try to figure out what happened. So there was quite a lot going on, and there's quite a lot of units that are gone from the field. So unluckily on my right flank, my opponent charged once with the Stonehorn on the hill, and I figured, well, it's a 12, I'll just try to lift this one out. had my State Militia ready to clear up his chaff, and then I could countercharge with my Knights of the Sun Griffin, just risk once or twice a very long charge by his Stonehorn. And then I failed my tower test. First time the Stonehorn charged, so I was off the field. So that didn't really work out as I had hoped, even though it is dicey to have a discipline test. But yeah, it just happens. You just have to live with it. Otherwise, my opponent, as pointed out in the previous picture, couldn't charge with this big Stonehorn character. I don't remember what he actually did with it. But in the end, I got my charge off with the Knights of the Sun Griffin in the middle onto his Rock Auroch, and I managed to boost my strength to strength 7 on the charge for the riders, strength 6 on the beasts, and I just killed the Stonehorn in one go, so that was not that much of an issue for me, to be honest. And the result was that all the scraplings around, they just fled everywhere. And then the combat on the left, that was the big combat. I would say that my opponent was still quite lucky with the 2 hit rolls, even though my opponent might not agree. Because in the end he killed off all of the knights with a slave giant that had to hit on 5+, with mammoth hunters that got jeweled out with Locket of Sanagai. So yeah, I thought the grind was still going quite okay for him, even though he lost every single turn with like a combat res loss of like 3. So yeah, this was I think this was not a good matchup combat wise for him. And yeah, maybe he still thinks otherwise, but he was quite passionate during the game that he thought this was a really good matchup for him. I don't know about it. I mean, the Arcane Engine giving distracting, having double perception of strength, it's quite tough for any matchup. Then otherwise on the left flank, my Knights of the Sun Griffin made short work of his Iron Fist Giant. And at this point in the game, I still had to score my objective, which was the wall near the hand of my opponent on the table. And my opponent had to score the forest, but he didn't have any scoring units basically on the table anymore. So it was really about my heavy infantry getting to the wall. And yeah, there was just a couple of turns of shuffling of characters, most notably his BSB still, who was alive at his other hand, so to the left side of the ruins. But in the end, I managed to make it so that I had 2 of my heavy infantry guys or something like that on the scenario. I still gave my opponent my Knight of the Sun Griffin in the middle with the Stonehorn, because I wasn't really invested into getting the Stonehorn any closer to my line, so I'd rather have him just charge there and then have a field charge or something. I don't remember exactly what happened, but the Stonehorn on the right wasn't really influential anymore for the rest of the game. And I only lost my 2 chicken units, my State Militia, and my knights. Yeah. Whilst on the other side of the table there was not a lot left except for a Stonehorn and some scraplings and a half a BSB, I believe. So this game ended in a 19-1. I think it's quite impressive how resilient the knight block is, because even if your opponent can just really outmaneuver you, it's quite critical how he does it, and even then, there's this one in this scenario, in this matchup, there's this one thing that I have to prevent, which is having a Stonehorn charge into the cavalry, because then they will die a bit quicker. Otherwise, it's fine basically. It's just fine. And the 1 of armor save is fine enough, coupled with distracting. And also, I mean, sure, you can kill 5 knights around, that is fine. I still have a BSB, a banner, a rank, so that's still a static combat res of 3. There's chances that I'm steadfast, and then for these scenarios, you just run with minimized discipline on the knights. And then it's very rare that you miss the discipline check. Yeah, they're just quite resilient. Yeah, so that was my first battle of the last day. Then we'll go to the next one. Our next matchup was against Team Sweden, and I got paired up against Lagerlof. If I don't pronounce your name correctly, please let me know. He was playing Vermin Swarm, and well, the list is this. So he has the Ruinous Dictator, a couple of Swarm Priests, so quite heavy on the magic, to be honest. Two big blocks of Black Fur Veterans, then some Shadowfest Stalkers, some Doomspark devices, artillery, Agnifiers, everything you can want in a Vermin Swarm list. I thought it was. I don't really know what I should think about this matchup. Like my friend who plays Vermin Swarm, he is quite confident that these chickens that I'm playing can go through quite decently. However, I mean, as long as the Doomblade guy is alive in one of these Black Fur Veteran blocks, I can't really charge in with one of the chicken units because it's really dicey, and I don't really like the risk. I could charge him with the Electoral Cavalry, however, I have to also not get any very nasty counter charges set up, and also these Ignifiers, they can still wreak havoc on my units. So what you see in the picture is the situation after my turn 2. Yeah, I was quite surprised by this. So after my turn 2, I lost like 15 of the heavy infantry of both units. I lost 13 knights. I lost 3 chickens from one unit, and I have 2 wounds on my wizard adept on Arcane Engine. And my state militia is still there. Yeah, so how did that happen, I hear you ask? Well, it's a combination of Wrath of Corruption and Rod of God. I mean, if you're not able to dispel 2 Rod of Gods in the first 2 turns and your opponent still gets a Breath of Corruption off on your knights, then that's gonna be quite tough, I would say. So my knights got completely annihilated in the first 2 turns of this game, and then the matchup looked a bit more grim in my eyes. Because my opponent still had these Doomspark devices that can still knock off quite some chickens. He has still the Ignifiers that can shoot into combat. So if I engaged with the Black Fur Veterans, my chickens might not even make that, I would think. And these catapults, they were just tracking my heavy infantry. So this board state was not good. The only positive thing, I think, is that my State Militia champion managed to shoot a wound on the Ruinous Dictator. So that was quite funny. And then we'll go to the next picture. So at this moment, well, my pairing was a G, so because of advice of my friend. Once I saw the board, I was a bit less convinced about it because of the 2 pieces of impossible terrain. Then my opponent could choose table side. He chose the pieces with the impossible terrain quite wisely because then I have less access to his flanks. It's going to be a lot of front engagements, and he can make use of his I don't know, Shadow Stalkers, I think they are, to chaff me up for a bit longer. And just keep blasting me with comets, with catapults, with Breath of Corruption, and the Doomsparks. So basically, after turn 2, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna try to get a draw out of this. We were playing Capture the Flag, so he needed to kill scoring units. He was quite far ahead already with killing my heavy infantry. He did kill my knight, so he did have 1 scoring unit, so I was behind 1 unit. And yeah, his 3 scoring units were not that accessible to me because he had 2 units of Black Fur Veterans that are quite big, and he had 1 unit hiding all the way in the back. And I figured that just walking around with the Knights of the Sun Griffin was going to take too much time, especially now at this stage of the game. And my opponent can also at this stage just pivot towards the biggest unit of the Knights of the Sun Griffin. Because my center of my army is basically just gone. So I shuffled up a bit, and I changed tactic to trying to get the Ruinous Dictator because I had both Silver Spike and Eyes of Fire. So I was hoping that over 6 turns I might be able to just pluck off enough wounds to make him panic, and then see what would come out of that. So another turn in, I decide to walk up a bit with my Knights of the Sun Griffin. My opponent goes wide. I don't really remember why, but I believe I put him in a position that this was the best for him. And I'm just thinking, yeah, I can go in, but the Ruinous Dictator is still there, so my opponent's going to be unstable. My opponent has his counter charge ready in 2 places, so if I go in, I get a Doomspark in my flank. I get maybe a Ruinous Dictator that'll even join the fight. If he can corner fight the chickens, then he's quite happy. And I will get likely a Vermin Black Fur Veteran unit in the other flank. I could still travel a little bit with my State Militia that magically just were able to dance around in his lines. I don't know how that happened, but they were quite happy in the location they were. But basically it was like the first 2 turns were really catastrophic, and then neither of us really did a lot. So I'll go to the next picture, because I had a short chat with our captain during our captain's call. And I basically wanted to play it safe. However, I was already down on the objective, so I was like, okay, I can chaff up his unit with the Doomblade. I can go into the other unit, and maybe I will be able to go through. I don't know. If I do, then it's good, because the scenario is going to be a draw. If I don't, well, I might just lose a unit of chickens. But yeah, it's that's going to be all. I was also considering charging the Ruinous Dictator with my cavalry models, because I could see them and it was going to be a 12 on the charge, and then I was like, nah, I just shouldn't do it, because yeah, it's not gonna, it might happen, but then a 12 is just too risky. So this is the situation after my turn 5, I guess, and then yeah, we were just dishing it out a bit, his turn, and then my turn again. I cast some magic, and then with 1 item fire, I managed to kill off the Ruinous Dictator. So he already had survived 2 silver spikes. What he did not survive yet is 2 shots from my State Militia champion with his pistol right in the eyes. So I believe the State Militia champion in the end did like 3 wounds over the course of the game. And then a final item fire that my opponent actually let me cast. I don't really know why, but I was like, this is my last hope. So I did an item fire. I got like 8 hits or so. I got 4 wounds. My opponent didn't save any of his armor saves, and then he did save like 1 of his Aegis saves, but I had a reroll on his Aegis saves. And then the Ruinous Dictator died. Luckily for my opponent, there was not a lot around that panicked. However, that meant that the Black Fur Veterans were no longer unstable. So in the end, I did manage to break those and get the points there. So this last round, we calculated it out. It made us go from a 15-5 on his side to a 12-8 on my side. My opponent didn't really like playing the Ruinous Dictator. He said that back in Sweden he usually got away with playing it, and then here at ETC it died every single game. And I think that most of you know what happens with Vermin Swarm when they lose their Ruinous Dictator. Usually it ends up in a loss for the Vermin Swarm player, and that is also what happened in his case. Yeah, so this is the result of my last game. I was hoping for a bit of a better result, however, after these first 2 turns with these comets that were so unforgiving, I was like, yeah, this is just not gonna happen if I just go full in. So I might as well just play it cautiously. And in the end, it paid off. I think if I would have had a result of 5-15 in the end, I wouldn't even have been too sad about it. Just because of these first 2 turns. It was sometimes you get disastrous results, but in the end, yeah, killing the Ruinous Dictator was also quite lucky. Even though he did survive 2 silver spikes that I believe he just passed the eggs on. So With that respect, over 6 turns, if you have Silver Spike and Eyes on Fire and your Ruinous Dictator is exposed every single turn, I haven't done the math, but I've mostly focused on these 2 spells because there was not a lot of else needed because the charge ranges of my opponent weren't that big because he mostly played infantry. So yeah, I don't know if with that magic setup the Ruinous Dictator should have survived or not. Maybe you guys have some idea about that, but yeah, this was the last game. Yeah, I always struggle to play against Vermin Swarm. I'm always afraid of just overextending my army in the sense of overcommitting, I think, and then breaking from combat, getting countercharged in some way, and then yeah, then it not going well for your own army. That is going to be my ETC experience. So in the end, I ended up with 89 points out of the possible 120. I feel like my battle against Carl should have gone a bit differently. That was the one battle where I scored 0 points. But it's also, I mean, dice are always a factor. I think I could have played differently, obviously. Just deploying a bit more in the back to when facing Carl, most notably. And yeah, that's about it, really. I think the list is still really good. I'll do a separate video on the list itself. But yeah, 89 is definitely not too bad. I was quite happy with the end result. I think I played quite some challenging games, quite some interesting games. I met quite a lot of interesting people, had good chats, had good experiences. So maybe I'll go to the ETC next year if I'm selected for the team. I haven't made up my mind entirely yet because it is a commitment of like close to €1,000 for us Europeans to travel to Pesaro and have all the food. Obviously, you have to have food, but hotels, food, transport, everything together. It's more costly than you might think at first glance, I think. Yeah, so I had a good experience, and I will hopefully see you the next time.